in the 1970s it was, one of my friends had cancer, and we thought we'd form a group with her. We always had the families together, and we went skiing as a group. And we thought we'd see have Judy part of our group in every Thursday morning. And I remember I was ironing, and you brought things that you wanted to do so we could sit and talk as well as do some. Some people brought knitting, sewing, whatever. I was ironing, and somebody says, well, what have you been, you're quiet, Anne, what are you thinking? And I said to them, I want to leave my husband. They, what? Because he was a pillar of the church, and he was well looked at and looked up to. And so they all sort of couldn't believe it. And that time went on. And after that, Judy died within 2 months. We all sat around with her and talked to her until she died and she could hear us. And then in 1989, I had to go. We agreed that it hadn't been working for years, so I knew he wasn't going to leave, so I thought I've got to leave. And I left 2 of my 3 children in the house with him. I mean, they were older, they're in late teens, but at the same time, it doesn't matter how old they are. There's never a right time to do it. It's either somebody's birthday or it's Christmas or something's happened. Anyway, he did help me to move into my apartment and some of the furniture from our house. So that was a huge thing that I acted on. And from that moment when I told everybody about wanting to leave, and I look back now and I think, I don't know how I did it, because I'm not that kind of person to give up the ghost and just walk out. But I knew that he wasn't going to go. So that was a light bulb moment. Took a few years to enact, but that was my first one. The second one is when Sue and I came over to England visiting in 93, yes. Mm-hmm. And we were up in the Lake District, and she went climbing, and I said, no, I don't want to go climbing. And I was sitting with the view of one of the lakes and sitting on a rock in the forest and everything. And this was a really a light bulb moment. There was a tremendous feeling that came over me, wanting to be in England. I didn't know where that was coming from, because I'm not religious in any way. So I told her when she came down, her eyes little, you did? You heard that? You were so surprised. Anyway, so that was amazing. And that was 93. Then in 94, we thought we might come to England in 96. So we had a year to get ready for that. In 1995, through the mail, I received a printout of my biological mother and my biological father. I was adopted when I was 6 weeks old, and I got into the best family. It was great, had a lovely time. But I didn't know these pieces of paper existed. I was born in Winnipeg, which is in Manitoba, the center of Canada. And these papers arrived through the mail. One dictated by my biological father, and one by my biological mother. And the first sentence in my biological father's piece of paper, he hoped that it would find a good home. So obviously he didn't hang around to know what she had produced. He was 25 years old, but the big thing, this is where the light bulb thing is, he was born in Northern England. Where did that come from? So they wouldn't tell me where he had been born, but he said that the family were nouveau riche, so maybe they owned a mill or something. I don't know. But that was one connection. And then my mother's, and I know her name, Barbara Coulter. She was 23 when she produced me. And what I found out from her was the history of all her sports. So that's been handed down to me, because I've been played every sport there is except cricket. And that was part of that, sitting on that rock. That must have, I don't know how it happened though, to get those pieces of paper, which I didn't know existed. And my biological father being born in Northern England, and my mother was Canadian born of Irish parents. So I had that European sort of flavor. So that was a huge thing in my life. And it all started from sitting on a rock and wondering why I want to be here. I want to be here in England.
The light bulb moment for me was when I met the members of AWOC Leeds, which at the time was my closest group. I was living in Nottinghamshire at the time, and I'd been to a couple of their meetings, but obviously couldn't go on a regular basis. But they set up a Zoom meeting for the period between Christmas and New Year, which is often a very difficult time for people who are on their own. And so I what's the word? Clocked in for this Zoom meeting, and there was a most marvelous array of people who most, I hadn't met before. But the thing that the light bulb moment was, every one of them, they were a lovely, lovely bunch of people. They were all so nice. And the other aspect was every one of them was different. And it was an absolute revelation to me, because every one of those people were really positive, and they were navigating their way through the experience of being aging without children, each individual in their own separate, unique way, and positively, very, very positively. And I just thought they were fantastic. And it was really the first time, that I'd sort of met, albeit on Zoom, a bunch of people who were like me. And it's a little bit like, when you hear coloured people talk and say, we didn't see anyone like us on the television. We weren't represented. There was no one like me. And it was very much like that, to see other people who are AWOC. And they were just great. And it did me no end of good. I enjoyed it very, very much. And, just, yes, any opportunity really I can to sort of hook up with people, because I've found very much I've had to be quite selective with the people I spend my time with, because often you find if they're at a loose end, they'll do something with you, but then the minute someone in the family clicks their fingers, they drop everything and rush off and dump you, and I found that I have found that very hurtful actually with other friends. It's the fact that you're knocked into second place or second or third or fourth place all the time, and I don't like that one bit. So that made me think to myself, I need to think very carefully about who I spend my time with in future. But yes, the light bulb moment was seeing those lovely people at the Leeds group. And of course, since then, I now join up with the York group, because they're the nearest to me, and we're starting to make a network up in the County Durham northeast area. So I'm looking forward to developing that. I've met 3 up here now, and we hope to build on it. That's all I have to say.
Right, talking about light bulb moments. They seem to be linked with my theatre creations. Because, all right, starting right at the beginning, when I was in Vancouver, I joined a group called No Kidding. And that was, I thought, well, that's very appropriate. So that's me. So let's join this group. And so the idea of no kidding was in my head. And then on a pride parade in Vancouver, there was a little woman standing on the other side of the whole rumbustious gay parade with motorbikes and swimming pools on trucks and goodness knows what. And she was standing with a paper bag over her head, and it said, "I'm 60 years old. When will it be safe for me to come out?" So there was another, that is an absolute light bulb moment. There are people who are in the LGBT community who are hiding under paper bags, and because of the way society is, or because of their own fears, or whatever it is. So then I come back to England with Anne, and we start the Real People Theatre Company. And there was another, trying to keep myself organized here. Let's start with Paper Bag People. So we had a show in the early years called Paper Bag People, and in it was a young lass who had invisible or hidden disabilities. She wore a paper bag and didn't want to mention those, but in our show, she went up onto the stage in her paper bag, and from her paper bag, she disclosed her hidden disabilities. And then the audience could ask her about how that felt and her experience, and share with her. And the second woman under her paper bag had alcohol abuse things that she didn't want to talk about. So she went up in her paper bag and talked about it. And then people shared from the audience. And the third one was domestic abuse. And that's something we really do have paper bags on our heads about. And so it was a sort of freeing moment to be able to share in a theatre performance this paper bagness. And then the fourth one was mental health, and that's another big hiding experience of life. And then the fifth one was Anne in her paper bag, and it said, "I'm 70, how old were you then? 60 or 75 years old, and when will it be safe to come out?" And then we talked about LGBT invisibility. But that wasn't back in the 90s. That was Margaret, her character. And so I brought that back, to Paper Bag People with Real People Theatre in York. And the other one was No Kidding. And I brought that back under No Kidding. This is all to do with theatrical, being passionate and carried away with an idea. No Kidding came back, and there were 10 scenarios, and I won't go through them all, but you can find them on the Real People Theatre website. And we've still got those scenarios that we can talk about aging without children, because it was by that time we'd actually started AWOC York, Aging Without Children. And so No Kidding was a springboard for us to talk about the experiences and the difficulties and the invisibility and the scams and the loneliness and the everything. And who do you trust with your finances and looking after your health and welfare and so on and so forth. And it's just the thing of being alone in your house, and what happens if you fall down and bash your head and there's nobody there. Anyway, it's all this sort of thing. So that all came out in our show called No Kidding, very much linked to AWOC and the whole AWOC issue, which hit me. And here's another light bulb moment, it hit me that the writing on the wall was that our society is getting older and there are more and more AWOCs knocking about who don't have nearby or any children or family as support. So the writing on the wall for the government who hasn't got it yet is that you need your social services to be strong enough and well funded enough and conscious enough to be able to be there to support, well, everybody, but AWOCs who at the moment, oh, your family will look after you, your children will take over because they will feel that, you know, you have supported them all their lives, and now it's the children's turn to support their aging. Well, they aren't here. They've gone to Australia. They've died. They're disabled. They've got mental health problems. They don't like me. I don't like them. I wouldn't trust the mother. AWOCs, everybody, the whole kit and caboodle, AWOCs. So anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say about that, but it's getting passionate about things that need changing. And don't talk to me about all the demonstrations I go on and trying to get the world to be a saner, kinder place where we can all live in peace. So the final thought for the day is a light bulb moment, which came out of Walking on Fire, which both Anne and I did in 1992 in Vancouver. And I kicked it off because I thought to myself, oh, look, there's a Walking on Fire workshop going on at a big hotel in Vancouver, led by this chap who says things like all the native peoples have a rite of passage into adulthood where the young boys, what happened to the girls? Well, anyway, the young boys walked on fire, and then they came out as strong enough and mentally aware enough to be considered adults. And I thought, it's like, oh, well, all right, then I haven't done my rite of passage. If they can do it, if these boys can do it, why can't I do it? So I signed up and went along to this hotel, and there was this chap leading us. And so he led us through all these, a workshop in strengthen your willpower and your, so there we were breaking blocks of wood and you know, anyway, and it was powerful. And then we went outside and there were these huge barrels of 1200-degree coals, and we tipped them over in the car park. It must have been quite a mess. They must have, anyway, we tipped them over and there was this path of burning coals. So all the men and the women in the workshop did our power, what's it. And then we strode across the path of burning coals and emerged at the other end, and everybody was all right. They hadn't burnt their feet. So I thought to myself, oh dear, this is a bit too aggressive and masculine for me. And one of the chaps said, one of the women said, there's a man who said, what Mam said to me, there's a woman out in the valley who does Walking on Fire. So I went home and I said to Anne, there's a woman out in the valley. Do you fancy walking on fire with her?
And I said, Okay. Well, what do you mean? no?
Sure, I couldn't do it.
So we drove out to the valley and it was lovely outside of Vancouver. And there were about 30 of us, weren't there?
Yeah.
All ages, all the different kinds of people from around the world, young guys, young girls. And so this is what we were going to do, walk on fire. But first we had to have was it a 2-hour workshop in which we did visualizations, and she led us through, Julie led us through all the blah, blah, blah. Then we had to sign saying that we wouldn't sue if we got burnt, which was really encouraging. And anyway, we went outside and, oh no, before that, we had created we had to go out and start the fire.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we had to
start the fire and it left it burning away there in
for
big barrels.
2.5 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then we came out and then each person took turns raking the pathway, 1,400 degree coals.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was okay. And then we were brought back into the workshop and they said, okay, I want you to visualize something you would like to have happen in your life.
Yeah.
And that you hold that in as you walk through the fire to the end. Don't think, oh, I'm going to get burnt. But that's what you want to have happen in your walking towards it. So make a long story short, we did the raking and everything. We gathered in a circle and we held hands and we said, every step I take on this world, on this earth is sacred. Okay. So then you could come and do it whenever you wanted. Well, Sue was one of the first to go and she walked right through it. And then other people did fire, they got played with the fire, did
melt down, rolled in it, were part of the fire.
And anyway, so we all did it.
And then Anne and I walked together.
Yes, we have a picture of that. And not one of the 20 people in this workshop had any marks on their feet.
But what about the chap?
Just a minute. So there was a young fellow there, and he saw these younger women and the older men and older women going through this fire, and he thought, and he froze and he thought, I'm the youngest one here. I'm a man. I should be able to do this. It got really angry at himself. So Julie, the leader, took him aside and got him back on course by we had this image. He had to concentrate on that image he had thought about. That would exist at the end of the fire. So he managed to do it. And when we all came back after doing this all together, we went back into the place where we were having the meeting. And we were all really excited. And he spoke up and he said, I was the youngest, one of the youngest there, and I was a man. I couldn't cope with everyone doing it. He says, but as soon as I got rid of my ego, and Julie helped me to get back on that, visualizing that thing that I want to have happen in my life. Then he said I could do it. And not one person had any marks on their feet. I mean, it's altered state of consciousness, really, isn't it?
So so you put yourself into a totally different state of consciousness. Yeah. And what I want to say is what I learned from that light bulb moment and that experience is that you can achieve, you can do anything you set your mind to, because you can create your own reality. So holding that in our hearts, thank you very much for watching, and over and out from the Light Bulb Moment.